Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our software automation webinar series. I'm Mike Fiella, a customer account manager in the Northeastern region. It's my pleasure to welcome you all today. Today, I'll be joined by Don Farber, co-founder of Vineyardsoft Software. Vineyardsoft released its first commercially available business activity monitoring solution, KnowledgeSync, in February of 1999, and the product is now the most widely used alerts and workflow solution on the market. Don will tell you more about this today. Just a few housekeeping items. All lines will be muted during the presentation. We will record and distribute the webinar to you in a few days for your convenience. If you have any questions, please type it in the chat box at the bottom of the GoToWebinar sidebar, and then hit send questions to staff at any time during the webinar. Without further ado, let's get started with our presentation.
Thank you very much, Mike. Appreciate the introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Don Farber, and I'll be your host in speaking about Sage Alerts and Workflow and how to become a data-driven organization. Now, a couple of quick introductory notes from me. First of all, I'm going to divide our time together into about 3 segments. The first 18 to 20 minutes will be a business level overview of this concept of becoming a data-driven organization. We'll talk about how Sage Alerts and Workflow support such an initiative. We'll talk about the components of the application and touch upon how it's licensed and priced. Following that, we will jump into the live alerts and workflow solution so that you can see how the application works, how you can go about tailoring it to your organization's specific requirements. Pardon me. And then finally, we will jump back into our PowerPoint for a couple final slides, some steps that you can take following this presentation to look further into this alerts and workflow technology, and we'll certainly leave time at the end for any Q&A that arises. And so with that, let me jump right into it. Now, in your ERP system today, for most of you, if not all of you, that's Sage 100, but in case you're using other ERP solutions, the information that's in it is wide, it's varied, and there's a lot of it. And probably, if you're like most organizations today, you use some combination of reports and analyses and queries to identify critical business conditions, things that you and your colleagues need to know about and what kind of action you need to take in response to those conditions. I tend to refer to that as the yellow highlighter approach to business, because chances are someone drops a report on your desk or you pick up a report from your printer. You then whip out your yellow highlighter pen, start paging through that report one page at a time to highlight just those items that are of importance to you, your colleagues, and the success of your organization. And the matter of fact is that there's just too much ERP information in order to allow you to keep on top of it all. And so what we're proposing and what we're going to be talking about today is this idea of turning to your ERP solution itself and enabling it to automatically monitor itself for critical, time-sensitive business conditions and to automatically notify the appropriate people and automatically respond to those conditions with the appropriate actions. And that, in a nutshell, is what we mean by the data-driven approach to business. Now, to summarize this, the data-driven approach is one that empowers the data within your ERP applications to automatically drive awareness and drive actions that positively affect both the productivity and the profitability of your business. Now, another way to think about that, and perhaps an even easier way, is to ask yourself the following question. In your daily business activities, when was the last time you felt like saying, if only we had known? If only we had known that this customer had so many past due invoices, we would have done something about it. We would have resent them copies of those invoices. We would have sent them a copy of their statement. We would have notified their account manager. We would have placed them on credit hold. And that's just one if only we had known condition. You'll see the slide in front of you is painting with about a dozen or so similar types of conditions. And it is exactly this type of scenario that a data-driven organization automatically monitors for and responds to these types of conditions when they occur. Now, here's a great thing about embracing this data-driven initiative. And that is that you're already more than halfway there. Because again, if you're like most organizations, you already know what are those critical business conditions and activities that you need to know about. You already know who needs to be notified or alerted about those conditions, whether it's yourself, your colleague, your customers, your vendors and suppliers, and you already know what kind of actions need to get taken. If a customer is past due, let's put them on credit hold. So the good news is that you already know those three things. It's just a matter of automating the process to do all of those in an automatic fashion. So data-driven automation, the analogy that I like to use is that it operates very much like a smoke detector for your business data. You know, we can all really understand why we have smoke detectors in our homes. And so the idea here is to have a technology within our business that operates in a similar automated fashion. We tell it what are those smoke signals that it should look for: low stock, overdue invoices, a client who's changed their buying habits. You tell it how often to check for those conditions and how to respond to those conditions if and when they occur. And then you quite literally turn this business smoke detector on and let it do its thing. Now, to think of a very specific scenario, and I've already alluded to it, it's in the area of accounts receivable. And think about customers who are late paying for their invoices. And one of the things as an organization certainly that you want to avoid is having to write off bad debt, uncollectible invoices. So there's a great statistic that we encourage you to look into and to utilize. It really helps you measure the efficiency of your AR organization. It's called DSO, and it stands for Days Sales Outstanding. To reduce it to its basics, this measures how quickly your customers are paying for the orders that they're placing with you. And the idea is to have that DSO as low as possible. And so when you think about customers who are delinquent in paying for their invoices, there are certain things that should automatically happen. And that is that if a customer is past due, let's have those invoices automatically regenerated and delivered to the customer. If a customer is past due, let's make sure that their account manager or sales rep is informed about that delinquent situation. And as I alluded to earlier, if a customer is past due, let's automatically have them placed on credit hold. All of these things being done automatically instead of having to rely upon you and your colleagues to take these actions. Now, when talking about a process like AR invoices, I think it's important to note that one of the key uses of a data-driving technology is to automate repetitive tasks or processes within your organization. And whether that's the generation and delivery of invoices, statements, purchase orders to your suppliers, these are the types of business processes that can really benefit from a data-driving technology. Now, a data-driven organization typically has 6 attributes, and they're listed on the slide in front of you. And I'm going to go through each one of these in turn, but in this case, specifically, how they are offered through the technology called Sage Alerts and Workflow, because this technology is a data-driving technology. So, Alerts and Workflow starts out by automatically monitoring your Sage ERP, Sage 100 application for any business conditions that are important to you. Bears repeating, any business conditions that are important to you. Overdue invoices, low stock, a customer who has changed their buying habits or has stopped buying from you, changes to a customer's credit limit or credit status. Again, any business conditions that are important to you, Alerts and Workflow can monitor. And since we are talking Sage 100 here, I do want to mention that out of the box, Alerts and Workflow ships with over 85 pre-configured business conditions, such as the ones you see on the current slide. And although we're going to focus on Sage 100 and Sage ERP solutions specifically today, it's worth mentioning that if you're going to go this data-driven route, you should really look at going that route enterprise-wide. Because a technology like Sage Alerts and Workflow not only allows you to monitor your Sage ERP data, but it also enables you to monitor all of your other applications or data sets, whether it's sales or CRM data, HR, human resources data, even business conditions that exist between multiple applications can be automatically monitored, identified, and responded to by alerts and workflow. Now, as its name implies, you're probably speculating, well, I certainly think this application sends alerts, and you'd be absolutely right. And although most people think of alerts in terms of an email, that's only one type of an alert. What I'm showing you on the current slide is actually a dynamic web dashboard created and automatically updated by Sage Alerts and Workflow. We actually call this a web alert. But this is by no means the only alert delivery method. All of the methods you see listed on the current slide are supported as alert delivery methods. And it's true, email still is the #1 most popular alert delivery method. And we support all of those email systems like Microsoft Outlook, Outlook 365, or hosted Outlook as it's also called, SMTP mail, hosted mail systems, etc. But also rapidly coming in second place in terms of alert delivery methods, as you can imagine, text messaging to a cell phone. You know, email is good, but you still need to go into email, find the email, open that email, and then that email becomes out of date. So definitely look into leveraging these other alert delivery methods. Now, sometimes when we talk about an alert, a simple tap on the shoulder, a simple heads up is sufficient, but in other cases, it's not. And going back to that scenario of customers who are delinquent in paying for their invoices, I've already mentioned, probably the most important alert that you could send would be a copy of the overdue invoice and have it resent to the customer. So Alerts and Workflow allows you to automatically generate and deliver all of your standard forms and documents, whether it's invoices, statements, picking lists, dunning notices, purchase orders, etc. What we're looking at here is an example of one of the most common uses of Alerts and Workflow. It's automatically generating a sales order confirmation based upon a new order that was received, automatically using your desired invoice or order confirmation form, automatically delivered to the corresponding customer, and in this case, carbon copying the customer's account manager or sales rep. Now let's just stick on this concept of overdue invoices for a moment, because consider this. If a customer is severely delinquent and has multiple overdue invoices, yes, we want to resend them copies of their invoices. Yes, we probably want to notify their sales rep. But when you think about notifying their sales rep or account manager, probably the best piece of information that you could send to their sales rep would be an AR aging report or something like that for that client to say, here's a list of all of this client's overdue invoices arranged according to aged bucket over 30, 60, 90, and 120 days. So it's worth noting that Alerts and Workflow automatically gives you the ability to trigger, generate, and deliver an unlimited number of reports. Now, by default, we use Crystal reports as our reporting engine, but if you're also using perhaps SRS, SQL Reporting Service reports, those also can be generated and delivered. And we offer integration with other reporting systems as well, such as Sage Intelligence and Sage Enterprise Intelligence. I want to focus just for a moment on the very first bullet on this slide. You'll notice it refers to both scheduled and triggered reports. A scheduled report, like perhaps a stock status report, is one that gets generated on a recurring schedule, daily, every couple of hours, once a week, etc. Triggered reports, for my money, are even more fun because you can say something like the following. Alerts and Workflow, if and when a customer reaches 90% of their credit limit, then I want you, Alerts and Workflow, to generate my AR aging report for that client and deliver that report to that client's account manager. So reports that are triggered in real time based upon business conditions within your Sage ERP solution. And of course, when we do talk about generating and delivering more detailed information like an AR aging report, sometimes it's true that a picture really is worth 1,000 words. So for example, if I'm concerned about my sales reps and whether or not they're doing a good job collecting invoices, payment for invoices from their clients, Again, perhaps the most useful bit of information that I could send out to my reps or my sales manager might be something like a bar chart showing for each sales rep the total of overdue invoices of each of their corresponding clients. So charts and graphs, bar charts, pie charts, line charts, etc., are part of the Alerts and Workflow solution. Which brings us to the final component, the Workflow Actions module. Everything that I've talked about thus far has to do with monitoring conditions and triggering the delivery of content. But earlier on, I talked about if a customer is overdue, let's have Alerts and Workflow put that customer on credit hold. If an item is approaching its reorder level, let's have Alerts and Workflow automatically create a purchase order for that item. And if a client does get placed on credit hold, we might want Alerts and Workflow go over to our CRM or sales system and actually schedule a phone call for that client's account manager to make to them to try and resolve that credit hold situation. So that is the entire picture of Sage Alerts and Workflow. Now, I mentioned out-of-the-box Alerts and Workflow ships with over 85 pre-configured business conditions for Sage 100. You can see some of the other pre-configured collections for some of the other Sage products. Note that outside of the Sage software arena, we offer over 75 collections of pre-configured events for other business applications. So for example, are you using the Avalara Sage Sales Tax solution? If so, we have an event pack for that. Are you using a document management solution, perhaps from Alltech or some other vendors? We have event packs for those solutions as well, and those event packs are always provided for free. Now, before we take a look at the application itself, I just want to touch upon a customer case study. An organization named Toyo Inc. They're a multinational manufacturer of ink for printing presses. They came to us many years ago. Their big issue was, in fact, having to write off bad debt. And so they decided to implement Alerts and Workflow. Once they had surpassed 6 months of usage of this technology, they actually reached out to us and said, guess what? We just passed over 20,000 alert messages sent out to our staff, to our vendors, even to our clients. We were kind of amazed by that number. That was about the fastest we've ever seen a client reach that number of alerts. But then they shared with us really the important information. Not that those 20,000 alerts weren't important, but we wanted to know the resulting effect on their business. And so they shared with us the items down in red at the bottom. They were able to quantify a savings of over 100 staff work hours every month. They were now using Alerts and Workflow to automatically generate and deliver invoices and statements and dunning notices and the like. And as a corresponding result, they saw their AR collections go up by an average of $11,000 every month. Now, those are some pretty impressive numbers, but they actually get even more impressive when we talk about the pricing for Sage Alerts and Workflow. Let me talk about how the application is licensed and priced. Alerts and Workflow is not licensed per user. It doesn't matter how many people you have in your organization, excuse me, nor does it matter how many users you have for your Sage ERP application. Instead, Alerts and Workflow is licensed according to the number of applications you wish it to monitor. And pardon me as I take a quick sip of water. That's a bit better. Okay, so starting off up at the top of this slide, let's say that you'd like to begin by using Alerts and Workflow to monitor your Sage ERP application for an unlimited number of business conditions. Now, a very important note here for some of you who might be in a Sage 100 multi-company environment. It doesn't matter how many companies you have within Sage 100. Alerts and Workflow is licensed not by database, not by company, but by number of applications that it's monitoring. Sage ERP, whether it's 100, 300, 500, or even X3, counts as one application. Let's say that you wish to monitor that ERP solution for an unlimited number of conditions, trigger alerts, an unlimited number of alerts to your own staff, your clients, your vendors, and suppliers. You want those alerts to be delivered via all of the methods I mentioned: text message, email, fax, web dashboard, FTP. And you also want the ability to trigger workflow, the ability to go back into Sage 100, or for that matter, into any other application database and actually add or update data. For all of that functionality, you'd be looking at a one-time purchase price of just under $3,300. You would add to that roughly 20% for annual maintenance and support. If you prefer to go a subscription route, pay as you go, then that option is also available to you for a monthly subscription price of $260, which is inclusive of maintenance and support. And so your only options are shown to you at the bottom of this slide. And that is if you have additional applications that you'd wish to monitor outside of your Sage ERP solution. Monitoring one additional application is just under $1,800. Monitoring two additional applications, such as a CRM and a HR solution, is just under $3,600. And for just under $5,400, you can purchase what's called the unlimited connection version of Alerts and Workflow, meaning that you can use Alerts and Workflow to monitor every single business application you own today or ever will own. And that not only covers monitoring your applications, but also, optionally, monitoring incoming email. A couple of years ago, we surveyed roughly 1,100 customers using Alerts and Workflow. We wanted to get an idea for how quickly they were paying off their investment in Alerts and Workflow. Turned out that the average payback time period was just under 3 months at 88 days. And that ROI calculator, by the way, is available to you for free from our website in case you'd like to see how quickly you could realize a return on investment in your purchase of the Alerts and Workflow technology. So you've got a conceptual idea for what Alerts and Workflow does. So at this point, I'd like to jump out of the PowerPoint and show you the solution itself. Now, a couple of words about the Alerts and Workflow technology. First of all, it's a server-based application. That means you typically install it on just one machine within your IT environment. Alerts and Workflow does not need to be on a dedicated server. You could put it on your Sage ERP server. You could put it on your SQL Server box, on your Exchange server, or even run it on a workstation, which is what I'm demoing it to you from today. Alerts and Workflow runs under any Windows-based operating system, so that makes that a mercifully brief conversation. And the way Alerts and Workflow operates is you tell it the various applications or modules you wish to monitor. You tell it the various conditions that you want it to watch for and how you want it to respond to those conditions. And then you quite literally turn it on and walk away from it. It runs as a Windows service in a completely lights-out processing environment. Again, going back to that smoke detector analogy of just sitting there, constantly looking at your ERP data and responding to business conditions if and when they occur. Now, what I'd like to do is to take you through the configuration of a typical Alerts and Workflow event. So what I did earlier was show you a list of all of the query definitions that are specific to our accounts receivable branch. I just wanted to show you that was some of the 85 pre-configured business conditions. I've chosen to activate about half a dozen of those for my demo today. And I'm going to take you into the very last one on the list because this is a fairly typical scenario for Alerts and Workflow. And it is its ability to look for overdue invoices and do something about it. So, expanding this event, you can see that it consists of 5 components. The first of those components is telling me that the event is currently active. We are monitoring for this condition, and we're checking for overdue invoices every day at 9 o'clock in the morning. Now, a couple of notes about this frequency of checking. Some events can be monitored very frequently, perhaps every hour, every 15 minutes, or even continuously. Those events that are less time sensitive, such as identifying a customer who has changed their buying habits, maybe monitoring once a week or once a month might be appropriate. Also, you have ultimate flexibility here. For example, I know that this particular event is not running on Saturdays or Sundays. I'm not at the office on those weekends, and so therefore there's no reason to trigger alerts if no one's going to be around to receive them. The second component of an event is referred to as its query. This is the triggering condition that we want alerts and workflow to look for. In this case, our query is called invoices that are overdue and have a balance in excess of X dollars. For this particular event, we're triggering on $100. You can easily enough come in here. Everything is based upon security and permissions. If you're so authorized, you can change this threshold, maybe from 100, 200, 500, 1,000, or whatever is appropriate. But typically, when I start to talk about the query designer, what most people want to know is just how easy is it for you to change or modify the criteria. For example, you might have certain customers you know they always pay late, and so you need to exclude them from this logic. So I'd like to take you into what's called the query designer. Because do you have to know how to write SQL or be a programmer in order to create or customize queries? Absolutely not. What you do need is a simple familiarity with the data and the database schema that's being monitored. In plain English, in the case here of Sage 100, we need to know what data sits where. If you've ever written a report for your Sage ERP application, you absolutely have all the expertise that you need. In this case, we're looking at invoices that are overdue, so I've chosen to retrieve data from a number of different tables or files in my Sage ERP system, including my open invoice table. Skipping ahead a couple of tabs, I'm able to pick and choose the individual fields of data that I want alerts and workflow to look at, such as the invoice number, the invoice date, the due date, the current balance of the invoice, etc. By selecting these fields here, I'll be able to put them into an alert message that I'll show you in just a couple of minutes. Perhaps most important of all in the query design process are the conditions that you want alerts and workflow to look for. Again, everything here is available in a plain English wizard-driven interface. This particular query has two conditions. The first, we're looking at an invoice's balance. We want to make sure that that balance is greater than a certain dollar amount, whether it's 100, 200, 500, whatever we want. Here we've chosen to leave that dollar value with a question mark. This enables me to reuse this one query in multiple events. Maybe one event that looks for a balance of $100 and another event that looks for a balance of $500. We only want to look at those invoices that are overdue. So our second and only other filter here is specifying that our invoice due date is less than the current date. You can do Boolean logic here, ands and ors, and make your criteria as specific as you need. And before we leave this tab, take a look at the bottom right-hand corner where it says, if column values have changed. Have you ever thought when you've noticed that a field within Sage 100 was changed? Boy, I'd like to know who changed that. I'd like to know what it was changed from and to and when it was changed. Well, Alerts and Workflow gives you that ability for any field, anywhere in your ERP system. And this includes user-defined fields. I can come in here and say, you know, I need to monitor to see if someone's changing an invoice's due date, because that's a definite no-no. So just by doing what I've done, I've told Alerts and Workflow to start auditing the value in this field. Now, just in case we do have any programmers with us on this phone and you want to see what Alerts and Workflow is doing in the background, I'll show you. It's executing a fairly sophisticated SQL select statement. Why am I showing you all of this? Because this lovely blue code is what you don't have to know what to do. Alerts and Workflow is creating this automatically for you. You don't have to know how to write any kind of code, but if you happen to have your own code, if you want to use your own procedures, you do have the ability to plug them in here. Let's see if we have any matching records. We're going to take a look at all invoices that are overdue and for more than $1,000. And in fact, we have many. We can see that our due date is back in 2010, and we can look at our invoice balance and confirm that, yes, indeed, those are all greater than $1,000. Okay. Let's go back and take a look at the rest of our event. We've specified how often the event is running. We've specified the triggering condition and the fact that we're going to look for invoices that are overdue in excess of $100. Now we're at the point of specifying what do we want the event to do if and when these conditions occur? Well, I think you'd agree. First and foremost, we need to tell someone about these overdue invoices. And so, as we talked about earlier, alerts can be sent out via a number of different methods, and that information in those alerts can be tailored in a number of different formats. I'm going to start off by looking at our instant message alert. And we're going to go in and actually take a look at that alert message, and since I am authorized to do so, I'm going to edit it. So, for all of these alert delivery methods, the construction of the alert messages themselves is very easy. All of the fields of data from your Sage ERP system are shown to you at the top of these tabs, and we can take them and simply put them down into the body of our alert message. This IM alert is going to send someone a message that reads, invoice number 123 for customer Acme Inc. has a balance of X dollars and was due on this particular date. Looking at this alert message, what I don't see is the date of the original invoice. So let's add that here as a field. So we'll say dated. Let's find our invoice date field. There it is. Choose it, drop it in there. And as easy as that, you can create or customize your alert messages. Pardon me as I grab another sip of water. So, the IM message. Now let's take a look at some of the other alert messages, such as email. Email can be in plain text or it can be in HTML format. This message happens to be in HTML, which always brings up the following question. If I want a nice looking HTML message with a table in it or my logo in it, do I have to know how to write HTML syntax? The answer is no, you don't. Because with Alerts and Workflow, we provide you with templates to choose from. This is one of those templates. You're simply going to drop in the fields of data that you want to appear within that message. Looking over to the right with all of my different deliverables, you'll notice that this event also has both a report and a chart associated with it. I can see those on the Reports tab of this event. Now, once again, if a customer has an overdue invoice, probably the best thing that I should be sending that customer is a copy of that invoice. So here I've chosen to have Alerts and Workflow use my existing invoice form to generate that form in PDF format. I can choose from a number of other formats as well. And Alerts and Workflow is going to automatically take each invoice that meets this event's criteria, i.e. it's overdue and for more than $100. For each of those, Alerts and Workflow will generate or regenerate the corresponding invoice, and as you'll see in just a few minutes, automatically deliver that invoice to the corresponding customer. But since we're talking about reports and charts, I'd actually like to take you into the chart design module. No additional hardware or software is required to create graphic alerts. And again, we all get too much information and too much email on a daily basis. Sometimes giving someone a quick picture is a lot easier on them than sending them a 5, 10, or 20-page report. So this graphic alert designer is part of Alerts and Workflow. It lets you choose the type of graph or chart you wish to generate. In this case, we're generating a bar chart. This is showing me my overdue invoice totals per account manager or sales rep. Let's have a quick look at that chart. And there we have it, 4 sales reps, and it so happens that Shelley Westland needs to be doing a significantly better job in terms of collecting past due invoices from her customers. Charts like this one can be embedded within emails, they can be attached to emails, they can even be posted to a web portal for easy access. You'll notice also at the very end of the list of deliverables, my very last deliverable is actually a file, a Microsoft Word document that Alerts and Workflow is picking up, instructing customers on how they can pay off their invoices using an online bill payment method. So we've identified the content that we wish to potentially deliver to people. The next step is to specify whom we want that content to be delivered to. In Alerts and Workflow, the alert recipients themselves are referred to as subscribers, and this event has 4. First of all, we're notifying everyone in our finance group, and we're notifying myself. Now, a couple of notes here. These are what I would call standard or hard-coded subscribers. I always want to notify our finance group. I always want to notify Don Farber. You'll notice for each of those hard-coded subscribers that you can choose to notify them via one or any combination of alert delivery methods. In this case, I'm notifying everyone in my finance group via email and fax and instant message. Sometimes I like to joke with alerts and workflow. You can really annoy the heck out of someone if you put your mind to it. Now, this group finance, as well as my own subscriber record, these actually are coming from my Sage ERP application. Now, you can manually create subscriber groups and individual subscribers in alerts and workflow, but if you look at an application like Sage 100, heck, you already have customer names, their email addresses, their phone numbers. You already have the contact information for your vendors and suppliers. And so we don't want you to have to manually re-enter that in alerts and workflow. So all of that alert recipient data, person's name, their cell phone number, their email addresses, etc., can be automatically read by alerts and workflow dynamically out of your Sage ERP system. Now I'd like to talk about the final two subscribers for this event, referred to as dynamic subscribers, because these are going to depend on what records meet this event's criteria. Again, we're looking at invoices that are overdue, and when we see an invoice that's overdue, the two most important people for me to tell about those invoices are the customer, to whom the invoice is associated, and the salesperson who's responsible for that customer's account. So we refer to these final two subscribers as dynamic, because they're going to change based upon, in this case, which invoices are overdue for payment. One last note before we leave subscribers. If I cursor over my subscriber branch here, you'll notice it's showing an email address that's a Gmail address. That is my secondary delivery address. In alerts and workflow, every person who's going to receive an alert is able to be set up with both a primary and a secondary alert delivery address. Why? Because Monday through Friday, I want to be notified at my work email address, but on Saturdays and on Sundays, I wish to be notified at my secondary, or in my case, Gmail email address. The last component of an event is its actions or workflow actions. This is where alerts and workflow has the ability to go back into your Sage ERP system and actually add or update records. Now, when it comes to writing data back into a database, alerts and workflow provides a suite of API tools, some of which are wizard-driven, others which are programmatic in nature, including a visual basic scripting engine, and coming soon in our next release, the ability to make web service calls. But the most important thing that I can tell you about this entire actions branch is that it's covered under an additional layer of security. You need to make sure when it comes to writing data into a database, whether it's Sage 100 or some other system, that only the appropriate knowledgeable people have access to this option. So not only must a person be authorized for access to alerts and workflow, they must be specially authorized for access to this tab in order to create one or more workflow actions. And do note that when I talked about workflow, I'm talking not only about going back into your Sage ERP application and adding or updating data. Alerts and workflow can also do such things as taking data out of your Sage ERP system and automatically adding it to perhaps a sales or CRM database. Okay, so you've got an idea for how alerts and workflow operates, how the application is designed. Before we leave the application, I want to share with you one example of just how sophisticated you can get in terms of your event configuration. I've just opened a branch called Sage 100 Sales Order Trends. This is my trend analysis event pack. And by the way, this comes with alerts and workflow at no additional cost. I'm going to take a look at this third trend analysis event. This is an event that runs, if I recall correctly, on the first day of every month. And let me explain what it does. It starts out by looking at each customer to see what they purchased for the month just ended. Then, alerts and workflow goes back an additional 6 months for each customer. Why? So that it can calculate what each customer's average monthly purchases comes to. And then as a last step, alerts and workflow is comparing for each customer what they purchased for the month just ended versus their average monthly purchases. And if for any given customer, their purchases for the month just ended represents a decrease of at least 30%, then alerts and workflow is going to send an alert. And let's take a look at this alert message. It's simple but sweet. This alert message is going to be sent to a customer's salesperson. And it's going to say, hello, salesperson. This customer of yours has placed orders for the previous month to date that represents a decrease of at least 30% over their average month. And we're showing just 4 fields of data. For each customer, what they purchased for the last month, what their average monthly purchases is based upon that previous 6 months of activity, and then the decrease. The decrease represented both as a dollar amount and as a percentage. Just imagine sales reps coming into the office on the first work day of a month and having waiting for them in their email box or perhaps in a web portal a list of their customers who have significantly changed their buying habits. A really useful event. Okay. So with that, I'd like to finish up with a few final slides, and then we can open up the lines for Q&A. So, a little bit of background about alerts and workflow. It's been around for a number of years now. In fact, it was first released in 1999. You heard Mike earlier talk about this being the most widely used technology of its kind on the market today. That's true. It's in use by over 12,000 organizations worldwide. But here's perhaps the most important statistic I want to leave you with. In use by over 12,000 organizations, and yet our customer support department receives fewer than 9 incoming or new support requests a day. What that really speaks to is that this is an application that is set it and forget it. You install it, you tell it what conditions to look for, you turn it on, and you walk away from it. Again, it's that smoke detector. It sits there constantly monitoring your Sage ERP data and perhaps related data sets, automatically responding as the conditions warrant it. It has been the recipient of numerous awards and commendations over the years, which I promise not to bore you with, but I will mention just the last one on the list because that's one I'm particularly proud of. Forbes, an organization that know a thing or two about business, gave Sage Alerts and Workflow their commendation for top productivity enhancing tool. And when we take a look at what we want to do in business today, that's it in a nutshell. Get the most productivity out of the resources that we have. So I mentioned earlier that alerts and workflow can be integrated with more than just your Sage ERP solution. So ask yourself, are you currently using any add-on solutions to your Sage ERP application? I mentioned Avalara or Sage Sales Tax. I also mentioned Alltech, their document management solution. Alerts and workflow can integrate with all of the other business applications that your organization is using, even if they're not from Sage. If you've got perhaps a Microsoft CRM, or you've got a human resources application, even homegrown applications, as long as an application is storing its data in a relational database, such as a SQL or Oracle database, alerts and workflow can automatically monitor and respond to conditions in that database. So, a couple of thoughts to leave you with. First of all, some questions that you can ask yourself about whether your own organization could benefit from becoming more data-driven. First of all, do you have a lot of date-sensitive information? Due dates, expiration dates, renewal dates, delivery dates, promise dates, and the like. Do you have certain business thresholds that should drive corresponding business actions? I gave an example earlier of once a customer has used up 90% of their credit limit, then we need to take these actions. One of my favorite uses of alerts in workflow is what I call inactivity monitoring. You know, whenever you talk about sending alerts, people always think about, well, I have an invoice that's past due, I have stock that's running low, a shipment that needs to be delivered within a certain number of days. People don't often think about inactivity monitoring. I need to know about a customer who has not placed an order within the last 30 days. I need to know about an item in inventory that has not moved within the last 2 or 3 months. Sometimes the most important information you need to know about isn't something that has happened, but rather something that should have happened, but hasn't. Does your organization as a corporate edict rely upon exception management? I'm a big fan of exception management myself. I don't need a 20-page report to tell me about everything that's going right in my organization. I'd like a 1-page report that tells me about just those few things that are going wrong. Trend analysis, as we saw at the end of the product demo, do you need to know when your customers or products are experiencing ebbs and flows in terms of their sales numbers? Do you need to know when critical ERP information is changed, such as a product's expected delivery date, a due date, a customer's credit limit or credit status? And finally, to go back to perhaps one of the first concepts we talked about, do you have one or more manually intensive, repetitive processes that really could be and should be automated? And the poster children for that are things like invoicing, statement generation, dunning notices, repetitive tasks that are currently done by hand that, with the help of a technology like Alerts and Workflow, could be automated. One last bit of information I'd like to share with you. There is an absolutely fantastic tool that you can use to really pinpoint what aspects of Alerts and Workflow could most be of benefit to your organization. Sometimes I talk about Alerts and Workflow as a bit of a Swiss Army knife of software applications. It can do a lot of things, and so sometimes it can be a little bit daunting to understand, to restrict, to pinpoint those aspects of functionality that your organization needs most. So, if you visit the Alerts and Workflow website, which is all spelled out, alertsandworkflow.com, in the lower middle part of the homepage, you'll see a question that says, does your organization need Alerts and Workflow? Click here to find out. This will bring you into the Alerts and Workflow Needs Assessment tool. It takes approximately 5 to 10 minutes to go through this tool. There's no charge, and you can actually take it multiple times should you wish. What this tool does is it asks you questions about your business processes, and the degree or type of automation that you currently have for each of those processes. Once you answer the questions in this needs assessment, you are presented with a report card. A report card that shows you for the functionality, the capabilities that Alerts and Workflow can offer on the left, the degree of need by your organization for each of those corresponding areas of functionality. Again, go and visit alertsandworkflow.com. Takes only a few minutes to go through this tool. I think you'll find it most useful. It really gives you a very fine appreciation for specific business scenarios that Alerts and Workflow can help within your organization. And so with that, that brings us to the end of our presentation for today. I wanted to make sure that we left plenty of time for Q&A. So at this point, I'm going to turn things back over, at least for the moment, to my colleague Mike at SWK and see if we have any questions that we can answer.
Thanks, Don. I appreciate that. And thank you for showing the Alerts and Workflow solution. There's a lot of good information that was available there for everyone today. Before we begin with the question and answer section, if you have any additional questions after the Q&A, you can please email your customer account manager directly, or you can email the group, which is camteam, C-A-M-T-E-A-M, at swktech.com. We'll make sure to get you to the right person there. Additionally, we are pleased to announce that SWK can provide complete financing options for all solutions. You can also email the CAM team to get some more information about that. Now for our questions here. Don, a couple questions here. First, on average, how long does it take to get Alerts and Workflow implemented and up and running?
That's an excellent question, Mike. Thanks, and my thanks to whomever asked it. It's a bit of a loaded question at the same time. Because this application, this technology is a bit like a Swiss Army knife, it really obviously depends on what you want to do with it. Now, having said that, by virtue of working around the application for the last 2 decades, we have some recommendations. The biggest one is to walk before you run. Alerts and Workflow can do so much, but we recommend that for starting out, an organization look at it strictly from the perspective of monitoring and triggering alerts. Yes, it can do a lot more. We talked about reporting and workflow, etc. But we find that the core application, the best way to start with it, is that monitoring and alerting component. So for example, if you were to identify somewhere around a dozen or so typical business conditions that you need to know about, that you need to communicate, whether it is overdue invoices, low stock, a customer who has changed their buying habits, if you were to identify roughly a dozen of those conditions, and with the help of the pre-configured event packs that are from Vineyardsoft, if you tailor those to your organization's specific requirements, specify who's going to be receiving the corresponding alerts, enable them, test them, and put them into production, that process, in a nutshell, typically takes around half a day to at most 1 day. So it's a very quickly implemented solution. But again, we recommend taking that initial step of monitoring and alerts, and you're looking at somewhere between 4 and 8 hours to have a dozen, 15 or so alert events fully configured, tested, and in a production environment.
Sure, that makes sense. But I guess to that point, Diane, we have obviously all types of technology here in everyone's systems. What happens if an alert fails to be delivered? Is there any way for you as the user to kind of track that with this solution?
Another good question, Mike. And you know, it's funny, when I hear that, it reminds me of the phrase, who's watching the watcher? Because in this case, alerts and workflow really is that watcher, that smoke detector looking over an organization's business. So the question, well, what happens if alerts and workflow itself has something occur that needs to be communicated? So to answer your question, Mike, alerts and workflow has an embedded module in it we call the watchdog. The watchdog is the ability for alerts and workflow to monitor itself. Because what you just described does happen. Sometimes we've got an invalid email address for a person we wish to notify. Sometimes we want to know if too many alerts are being sent about a specific condition or to a specific recipient. You know, the last thing that we want to do with alerts and workflow is send someone 20, 50, 100 or more email alerts, because that person's going to simply start ignoring those alerts. We need to know, for example, if someone goes into alerts and workflow and changes the configuration of an event, or someone creates a new event. So alerts and workflow comes with this module called the Event Watchdog, or simply the Watchdog. That is a collection of alerts and workflow events that allow it to monitor itself, not only for such failures as failed alert deliveries like failed emails, but also watching such things as the number of alerts being sent and any new alerts or events that are being configured or customized by people in the system.
Sure. I think we have one final question here. Donna, I think it's probably something that's good, something we should hit on here. We have a lot of questions about what else you can use this solution for. One of them in specific was another Sage solution, Sage Manufacturing, or the Job Ops solution. Is there some type of way that KnowledgeSync can work, or alerts and workflow can work with Job Ops?
Yes, absolutely, and I appreciate that question being asked. You may recall from earlier in the PowerPoint, I mentioned some 75 or so additional non-Sage related event packs. An event pack is a collection of alerts and workflow events. And I'm very pleased to be able to answer that last question with, there is an event pack for Job Ops. So if you visit that alerts and workflow website, you'll notice that there's a download option. And from there, you can download not only the application, but any one of those event packs. And so you'll see an event pack for Job Ops. I believe it consists of roughly 25 to 30 at the minimum pre-configured events. So the answer to the question is there's an event pack that exists for use with Job Ops. It was actually configured with the assistance of the Job Ops staff themselves. So some very useful events. And again, all event packs are free so that you can download that and try that out from the Alerts and Workflow website.
Sure. Don, I appreciate that. We have a couple extra questions, but I'll make sure that the cans reach out to the people that ask them directly. That concludes our webinar for today. I want to thank everyone for attending, and Don, obviously, thank you for your time.
My pleasure, Mike, and my thanks as well to everyone. Enjoy the remainder of your day. Take care.